Cool. Most of you have joined, some of you are yet to join. Anyways, let's start with today's session. So last class was 4th of Feb. That was your first class of introduction to this mern course that we are having. We just started with intro to the HTML and we have the basics of web page to be discussed. Let's quickly revise with that and then we'll continue with this. Pretty much HTML is done. Just few things are pending. HTML forms is pending. Then we'll start with our CSS. We'll try to finish CSS by today only. CSS is a very detailed topic, but we'll try to finish HTML CSS by today itself. Anyways, let's first we start with the basics of web page to understand the client server architecture or the web stack or web development in general, right? What is the client server architecture? A client is something which makes the request. A server is something which serves the request, right? Client makes the request, server serves the request. That's what is called server. API is something which takes the response from the server, bring it back to the client. Again, API is just an interface. When we say it takes response from server and bring to the client, not always. It can be other way around also. Generally speaking, API is something which is used to communicate between two softwares or two pieces of software, right? That is what you call as API. Majority of the times it is between server to client. That's why we call like this, but it's not mandatory. It has to be only from server to client. Now, browser, go to gmail.com, just a real life example I've given. Go to gmail.com, client will become who? You are the client via browser. So browser becomes the client which makes a request that, hey, I want to go to gmail.com. Who is the one who will request or who will serve the request? Gmail server will serve with the request. API is something that you have used /gmail.com / your user ID, maybe /login, whatever the API that you're accessing. More real life experiences that in terms of practical example I've given is a restaurant. You go to a restaurant and you say, hey, I want to have a large cheese pizza. You made a request. You're a client, you made a request, and this is your request. Who is the one who will serve that request? A chef or a cook will be the one who will actually serve your request. He got the request, he will make that pizza, he'll give it to you, right? Giving it to you is given by a waiter, that is a API acting in this case. Then we come to the technical side of things. Front end is something which is, when you say front end developers, this is something which is working on browser side or client side of the code, which is responsible for UI and UX. UI user interface, US is user experience. What is user interface? User interface, as you can see, as an application. No functionality, only the interface, as you can see. In terms of button size, colors, fonts, gradients, etc., etc., these are user interface. User experience means which section should be where, which division should be where, how it should be shown, how it should be rendered, how as a user you're experiencing the web page. That includes user experience. Then we talked about backend. Whenever you say any backend dev, that actually means how the data is fetched, stored, streamed, rendered, populated, etc., etc. Backend technically means something dealing with the data, right? Or parsing in the data, storing in the data, or anything with the data. API is somewhere in between, which is application programming interface, fetch data from server and give it back to the client. When somebody says full stack, that includes front end, means client side, back end means server side, and deployments. Deployments are what? Deployments are, some people consider as part of DevOps, but nowadays it's not more part of DevOps to be precise. Deployments is CI/CD pipelines and generating automated end-to-end pipelines. So coming into the tech stack or the language preferences, in front end we use HTML, CSS, JavaScript, TypeScript. These are the languages. Frameworks include React, Angular, and Vue. In backend, the languages, popular languages are Java, Python, C++, C#, Golang, Node.js, etc. Frameworks are Spring, Spring Boot. These are for Java, Jane is for Golang, Django is for Python. Databases include SQLDB, NoSQLDB, Graph, and file storage system databases. Then in deployment, as I mentioned, CI/CD, Docker, monitoring, and logging. This is your overview of how does the website development looks like, or what are the tools and tech stack used in the website development. Okay. Then we start with our intro to HTML. That is what we're going to finish today. And then we are going to go for CSS one. So intro to HTML, what we have done. Number one, what is HTML? HTML is a hypertext markup language. It's a markup language. It is not a programming language. What is a markup language? Markup language is something which is used to describe the structure of a web page. So how the structure of a web page is shown, that is determined by HTML. What is a programming language? Programming language contains a logic. That logic is responding to what is the input, what should be the output. But since we are not taking any input output, so it's just a markup language defining the structure of a web page, nothing related with programming logic in it. Okay. It tells browser how to display the content. Obviously, it's a client-side language and it includes a series of elements. Now, very first thing, let me also open the file that we have created. I'm just going to open index.html that we created in the last class. Okay, this will be our shared file. This will keep on coding, right? Now, one thing to be clear, HTML just shows you where to put the values. CSS shows how to show the values, and how the functionality will come in, that is determined by JavaScript. So HTML is just the content of a web page. JavaScript is the functionality of the web page, and CSS is how that content is displayed. That's it. Then we move to the very basic code example. We talked about each of these individual elements. First, this doc type HTML, what does it does? It denotes that it is, hey browser, whatever browser you are ending, I'm using HTML5 to the browser. HTML tag is the root element. As I said, it works for a DOM model, which is document object model, where the root element is HTML, everything will be a child part of it. So parent is HTML, everything is a child part of it. Next comes the head element. Head element means a meta information about the page. It can include title, it can include meta information, it can include favicon. Then we have title, which is the name of the page. We have body. Body is a container itself. Container means it can contain multiple things. So you can have headings, you can have paragraphs, you can have hyperlink, you can have table, you can have list, images, audio, video, forms, etc., etc. P is for paragraph tag and H is for heading tag, H1 to H6 in decreasing order. H1 being the largest, H6 being the smallest. Then comes about our HTML elements. What do we have in HTML elements? Element is something which is combination of a start tag, some content, and an end tag. So you can see a tag name here, which is a start tag, some content, and an end tag. Elements in HTML means HTML, body, H1 to H6, P, B, P for paragraph, B for this is break. All of them are elements in HTML. Usually an element start with a starting tag and end with a closing tag. This is starting tag. As you can see example, this is ending tag. There are some elements which are empty elements, right? So empty elements, they do not have any end tag. Some HTML elements have no content, so they do not have any end tag. So example, BR tag. So this BR tag do not have any end tag. That is what you call as break tag. Small logo, favicon. How do you add the favicon? That also I've shown. Just in the head title, just give this length relation equal to icon. Type is equal to, even if you remove this command, that is also fine. It will work probably fine. And hyperlink, whatever hyperlink you want to use as a favicon. Favicon usually come with favicon.ico. So whatever ICO file you wish to use a favicon, you can use it. I'll just take it from the Google yesterday as the same, right? Then we talked about different types of tag. The very first tag was anchor tag. Anchor tag is just to create hyperlinks. The way it works is, here you open your anchor tag, here you close your anchor tag. This is your content, whatever you want to show. And href equal to link. So href is what? Href is the hyperlink. The link that you want to create, you just give it in the hyperlink. I think I have shown it here. There you go. We shown for the Google and the target view was seeing that. Next come the image tag. In terms of image tag, you give img tag, you close the img tag. You give source, you give alternative tags, you give width, and you give height, right? HTML is not case sensitive. So what does that mean? Even if you use capital IMG, that will also work. But I will highly recommend keeping it lowercase. Okay. Here is your image tag. This is your source. This is your alternative text. This is your width. This is your height. Then what are HTML element? It tells about the content of a web page, start and close with closing tag and ending tag. What are HTML attributes? These are important. Attributes contains additional information about HTML elements. Repeating it again. Attributes contains additional information about HTML elements. These are always specified in the start tag, and attributes are usually key value pairs. For example, name equal to value. So if I give anchor link, hyperlink equal to this link, target equal to this, Google. So this is my element as the anchor tag. Attributes are href and target. Similarly, for this one, my element is img. What are the attributes? These attributes are giving me additional details about this image tag. For example, the source of the image is this, alternative text is this, width is this, height is this, etc., etc. Now, images can be external images or internal images. External images can be copyright issues, so they can be easily removed. So we have absolute URL and we have relative URL. Absolute URL is you take any external website link and you put directly. So this one is absolute URL. If you're uploading something from your own machine, so you can provide the relative URL path also, wherever your image exists. There. Okay. Then we move to next part, which is HTML div. Div is used for division type, which is used to create sections in the HTML page. I just given the example of my website where you can find different for about us, for team, for contact us. So they can be create different div IDs, and these are different sections you can create in your web page. Then you can put a navigation bar. Using a navigation bar, you can connect all of them together. Then comes about list in HTML. So there are three different types of list: unordered, ordered, and description. Unordered list contains a dot, ordered list contains 1, 2, 3, and descriptive list means you can give the description about that items. These are the code that we have done for, and we have seen the output as well. Then we talked about HTML tables. Table consists of cells inside rows and columns. This is the code that we have seen. This is a table. This is one table row. If in a table row you give th means table heading. So by default, table heading will become bold. If you just give td means table data, that will not become bold. That will be rendered as it is. Okay. A table cell can contain all sorts of HTML elements. It can be text, image, links, other tables, etc., etc. This is what we have discussed till the last class. Start with HTML forms, then we'll move to CSS. And this is the code that we have done till the last class. This is your index.html. And let me open the website also. What have we built in last class? This is index.html. This is something that we have built in the last class. Let me share that on the screen as well. Okay, this is something that we have built in the last class. Okay, I'm just going to go back to my Sublime text. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share the complete screen where I can just split the screen in two halves. So it will become just like yesterday, it will become much easier to work with. Cool, guys. In the meantime, if everybody clear with it, give me clear in the chat. Any doubt, feel free to ask. Everybody clear? Give me clear in the chat. Any doubt, please feel free to ask. Okay, all clear. Let's move to the next part. Today we are going to start with HTML forms. So I'll just increase this a bit. I'll talk about HTML forms, then we can decrease it, and then we can continue with parallelly seeing the output. So starting with first HTML forms. In this HTML forms, we'll cover buttons also, we'll cover emojis, audio, videos, etc. What do you mean by HTML form first? As the name form says, an HTML form is used to collect user input. It's a form, right? So it is used to collect user input. And the user input most probably is most often sent to a server for processing. It goes to a server for processing, most probably. That's how it works. Okay. How does the HTML form looks like? The HTML form works with number one, form element. Okay. What is a form element? HTML form element is used to create a HTML form for user input. Okay. Example, form, and whatever form elements you want to keep. That's how it looks like. Okay. Again, every element is a container. Just to be clear in HTML, one element can contain multiple elements, and element can further contain the attributes. So form element is a container. What does it mean? It can contain text, it can contain checkboxes, it can contain radio buttons, submit buttons, etc. It is a container for that. Okay. Next, we have number two is input element. What does the input element is used to do? As the name says, input. So input is the one, and input element can be displayed in many ways, right? Depending upon type attribute. So what is the type of the input? That is the form that you are submitting. That is what will determine the input element. What do you mean by the type of the form? You must have seen that many forms, they have different input types. Some of them are text, some of them are radio buttons, some of them are checkboxes, etc., etc. That is what I mean by type. So I'm going to give it here. Input type equal to text. If you see input type equal to text, what does that mean? Text. What does that mean? That means it's a single line text. What next? Input type equal to radio. It means it display a radio button. Okay. Input type can be a checkbox. What does that mean? It display a checkbox. Input type can be submit. What does that mean in terms of submit? So it can be a submit button, or it can be just a simple button. Okay, basically a clickable button. That's the basic of form. Now, in terms of text field, you can give various entities in the text field and you can define how the text should look like. One more thing to be clear, there is one more element, or third is label element. What do you mean by label element? Because before writing the code, I want to make sure that all of you are clear with different elements. What does label element means? Label element is, let's say label element defines a label for form elements. If I'm having multiple elements, let's say I'm taking first name, second name, etc., etc. So label will define what is the label for those form elements, right? So it helps users to understand the input required by form. What kind of input is required? That is what is used for. Okay. One more thing, the for attribute. The for attribute of the label tag should be same as or equal to ID attribute input element to keep it consistent. Okay. The for attribute of the label tag should be equal to ID attribute to keep it consistent. That's number thing. Now I'm going to start with code examples. We'll go with all the one. We'll take for the text input, we'll take for the radio input, etc., etc. So let's go one by one. Number one is text input. If I have to create a form, if I have to create a HTML form, which has to take a text input, how can I code the same? So I open my index.html, I'm closing the fourth web class. Here I want to create a form. So first I'll give a heading that here, this is a form. So copy this, paste it here. I'm going to tell that this is a text form. I'll just start with form first. What I want to create is, I want to create a form. I want to close this form. Inside this form, I want to create something. So first thing I need is, I need a label. For what? I need a label for, let's say, first name. So here I can give the content. First name, close the label here, put a break tag. Okay. In the input type, what will you have? I'm keeping it to be text. I told you one thing, this for must be equal to the type ID. So whatever you give in this for, same as to given in the ID. So I'll keep f name here as well. Okay. And name with name equal to f name. Whatever input you have taken. And that's it. Give a break tag here also. There you go. Then what? This is for the first one. Let's copy this, paste it here, and make it for what? Make it for second name also. So it will become S name. Just give it a second name. This has to be S name. This has to be S name as well. Okay. And that's it. There goes your form part. Now we have saved this. Let's open our website. I believe my screen is visible, so all of you can see the website also. I'm just going to refresh it. Can you guys see this form? First name and second name. I can give a first name. Let's say I'm giving Devang here. Second name I'm giving Sharma here. All of you can see this form, yes or no? Let me know in the chat. Yes, all of you can see on the browser side, just let me know. Okay, all of you can see it. Submit, I have not added. Submit button I'll add when I'll move there. Just I'm telling you how to create different types of input. So as of now, we have done the text input. So I'm gonna come here. Okay. Open Submit tab, I believe. Just gonna close here, increase the size. I'm gonna come back here. So this is the code for your HTML form for text input. This was for text input. I'll keep it a bit here. I will make it as text form. What do I need next? After this text form, I need to make sure of different other type of forms, like which is radio button. So next one I'm going to show for radio button. How does the input for radio buttons look like? I'm going to copy the same thing. Radio form. In radio form, what do I need? I need to give the input type as, well, first I have to give a label as well, or you have to give input type also. I'm giving the input type as radio. ID, whatever you want to give, you can give it here, totally fine. Same input time you want to give it radio, you can keep it radio. ID you want to keep change or you want to keep same, that is totally fine. Just in the input type to be radio. Save this. Let's reduce the size. Let's refresh this page as well. What do I get? If you can observe it, I got the first name as well as the second name. I hope all of you can see this. I can see the first name as well as I can see the second name. Everybody clear? The reason, okay, good question. Why I'm getting this first name and why I'm getting this sort? The reason that you're getting is because I'm using label first, input later. If you want to keep it consistent, put the label, put the input first and then put the label, right? So copy this, paste it, now save it, now refresh it. Now I'm gonna put refresh. I think it is not updated yet. Nothing. Either it is not rendered properly or it is not updated at emojis. It is giving first name and then second name. Let me check again. Radio form input type is radio. ID you have given is first. Name you can give to anything you want. That's totally fine. Value that you have given is something else. Okay. One thing to add here is after this, you can give one more attribute, which is value. Let's say value I want to give as first name. Okay. Label for this label ends here. This is fine. Another input type radio, ID second name equal to this. Value you can give here as second name. This looks good. And you can give the second name as an attribute value. This looks good. So you just refresh this. Now it comes the first name and second name in the label value. So you can select this label or you can select this label. You can select both of them also because I'm not made one selection. It can be multi-selection as well. That's how the radio button looks like. What is the other category? Let me show you that also. Just gonna zoom this. Come back here, just change it here, move it here, put that here. How to allow multi-select? By default, it is multi-select. By default, it is multi-select. How to make only one selected? If you have to make only one selected, you have to include the submit functionality. That submit functionality you can give that I want to submit only once. By default, it's multi-select. You don't have to do anything. But for submission, you can include that I want to submit only once. Okay. So this is for the radio form. That is where you go for radio button. What next? Radio we have seen. Let's go for checkbox. Checkbox. Pretty much similar code. I'm able to select only once. When I try to refresh, you should be able to do it. Try to refresh, you should be able to do it. I'm able to do both. Just make sure that I've given the value for both. I've used a value attribute here. If maybe probably you have not used the value attribute. You need the code. This is the code that I've used. You should be able to select multiple if you are giving value attribute. Okay. Anyways, coming to checkbox, what do we have in checkbox? Checkbox help you select 0 or more options or whatever number of options you have. Pretty much similar just like radio button. So I'm going to introduce the checkbox buttons also. Checkbox form. What do I need in checkbox? First, the input type will change to checkbox. What do I need apart from that? ID, whatever I want to give, name, label for whatever ID that I have given here, number 1. I've given the label. I've changed, I will change it for checkbox also. And I will change it for value, and this is fine. Okay. Now I'm just going to save it. Let's run it here also. Let's see the output. What do you get? You get a checkbox. You can select this one. You can select this one also. That's exactly what I was saying. So even in checkbox, you can select multiple ones. 1 and 2. Okay. Just like this one. Cool. That was your checkbox. Nothing much to add here. So just taking this piece of code. You have to just take the input type. Rest of the things are pretty much same. That was for checkbox. And finally comes your submit button. How does the submit button look like? That is important one to discuss. Submit button is also pretty much the same. I'm just gonna keep submit button. In that submit button, what you have to do? I define the label for, so I will keep the input type a bit later. Remove this, paste this. First name is the label here. And what do I want? I want the input type to be, let's say, keep it text. ID have kept the first name, and value. Value is not even required. That is fine, not an issue. Radio button should be single select, right? And we generally do in forms. Yeah. You can give it both. You can keep it single select. You can keep it multiple select. We can select only one option. So should we give both the same ID? No, same ID is not required. Even if you want to keep it simple ID, just remove the value from it. That's it. So in my radio button, I've given the value, remove the value attribute, it will become a single job. Then same thing here. Copy this, paste this here. Input type, I'll just change it back to text. I got the label name for first name. I got the label name for second name. I've given the values here. Given the values here, all good. Now what I do is I just create my input type. Do we have to group checkboxes if we want user to select only 1 out of 4 checkboxes? Yes, then you have to group because by default checkbox are multi-select. By default checkbox are multi-select. So input type will become what? Input type will become submit. And in that submit, my value will become whatever value we want to give. One more thing to add here is that, and why is that an arrow? Form button closes here, form button closes here. Okay, this was not closed. One more thing to add here is that when you click on submit button, usually you want something to happen. You just don't want to show the submit button. Let me show that. I've saved this. I'm going to show on the browser as well. Can you guys see the first name, the second name, and the submit button? Can you guys see that? Let me zoom that a bit if you cannot. This is what I'm showing about. Can you see it? Okay. Why am I getting first name and second name here? This is the default value. You want to change the default value? All you have to do is whatever value that you have given here, that is a default value. So let's say I say that my input value is Devang and this value is Sharma. So the default value that I will see here is Devang and Sharma. See, now I have the input value as default and this is Sharma. These are default values. Obviously, you can add it and you can change to whatever you want. I can change it to something like Devang1 or whatever. Observe something. I'm just opening. Let me zoom this one also. Observe something which I want to show. I just want to zoom this. Go to right click. You can see the view page source. You can see the HTML code for all this. This is the submit button. Apart from that, the thing that I want to show is right click, inspect. When you go in the inspect tab, inside the inspect tab, just go to this, just go to network and check for the calls that I want to make. I want to click the submit button. I want to know what will happen if I click the submit button. I click on submit. Can you see this request? Index.html. What happens when I click that submit request? This is what it happens when I go to submit, because I'm not given any link. I'm not given any action item. What should happen? Agree? I'm not given any link. I'm not given any action item. What should happen if I click a submit button? So when I click submit, it just reloads the page. So you can see the preview here. In my headers, you can see the request that this is the web page where this web page is existing. This is the version that I'm using, Mac OS, etc., etc. And request header, response time, all of that you can see. In the payload, the first name is given as Devang, second name is given as Sharma. On the source, you can see first name and last name. I can see the view pass. Your encoded word, you can see. So preview looks like this. Response looks like this. Because in response, I don't have anything. So it's just re-entering the same page. Here you can find the timings, whatever request. It's only one request. So 11.69 milliseconds. Everybody clear with this code? What happens after submit? Because there is no button, there is no API. So it just reloads the same page back. All good? All good? Okay. If you have to send this response to a server, what you can do is, let's say I want to send this response to a server. You can just do one item, form action equal to whatever. Let's say my action page dot php or JSP, whatever you have. You can give it like this. Now this API will go to this action page. Okay. I'm going to refresh this. See it again. I'm going to click this submit. Now just see this. Did you see a red color error here? What is the red color error here? If I see the preview, failed to response data, no resource found with given identifier. Why? The API was actually taking me to file/action.php slash first name Devang. This is the API I'm trying to access. And since this PHP page does not exist, that's why I'm not getting any response. That's why it is in red. And page says error. Even the error message saying the same. File is not found. So I go back here and that's how it looks. So when you have to send a server, you can just include action button here. Action button will lead it to the server one. Go back here, move it here. When you generate the response, you can send it to server like this. I'm going to copy this. This is the submit button. So these are the 4 different submit buttons. These are 4 different buttons or input text file you can see in terms of format. What else do you have? That's pretty much. And finally, we can move to next one. These are the different 4 types. Quickly revising this one, what do we have discussed in this? We discussed HTML forms. I'm marking this as done. Buttons also we have done. What do we discuss in HTML form? An HTML form is used to collect user input. The user input is almost often sent to a server for processing. We talked about different elements. The first element or the core element is the form element. HTML form element is used to create used to create HTML form for user input. Identity or the tag is the form element, and this is the closing tag. Form element is a container, which means it can contain text, checkbox, radio button, submit button, etc. etc. Input element is what? Input element can be displayed in many ways, whether it's a text for single line, whether it's a radio for radio button, whether it's a checkbox for checkbox, submit for submit, button for clickable button. What does label element means? Label element or the label tag defines a label for form elements. It helps user to understand the input required from the user. Again, I'm repeating, the 4 attribute of the label tag should be equal to the ID attribute in the input tag. If you're not doing it, it will not be rendered properly. So text input, this is the code. As you can see, you can give the label. This ID of F name has to be this label for name. 4 attribute of label will be equal to the ID attribute of input. That's the bottom line. Okay. We've seen the input button for text. We have seen for radio. We have seen it for checkbox. We have seen it for submit. And that marks the end of your HTML forms. Any doubt in this, please let me know. If it is clear, type here in the chat. Come on, guys. Any doubt, let me know. If it is clear, just type here. Okay. Now we are going to start with introduction to CSS, cascading style sheet. In terms of CSS, what are the syllabus here? I'm just going to zoom this. What are the syllabus that we have in terms of CSS? Let's see that also. We're going to start with intro to CSS. All of this I'm marking it as done, not that useful. Just take this to do. Move it. We have intro to CSS, then we talked about types of CSS. Then we talked about why CSS. That's also an interesting question. Types of CSS, then we'll talk about priority of different CSS. This is an interview question, important one. What is different priorities of CSS? Then we can talk about CSS syntax and selectors. That's pretty much in CSS. And obviously we'll be coding as well, right? Let's start one by one and then move to next one. The very first thing is introduction to CSS. What do you mean by CSS? CSS is, first of all, cascading style sheets. What do you mean by cascading style sheets? Let's see that also. Anyone knows the meaning of cascading? Anyone knows the meaning of cascading? Nobody? Okay. Anyways. Yeah, explain if somebody knows. What is the meaning of cascading? Linked. Linked to what? Linked to what? One after other. Okay. Not exactly correct, but partially it is correct. Cascading style sheet CSS. What does CSS do first of all? It can control layout of can be applied to same element at different levels. Actually, vice versa. Can control layout of multiple web pages all at once. Not just one web page, multiple web pages. You want to understand the layout of it. It can be managed all at. That is what CSS does or cascading style sheet does. Why it is called cascading? Let's see that also. Cascading means a style applied to a parent element. A style that you apply to a parent element will also apply to the all children element. Okay, that is why it is called cascading. Elements within the parent. Okay, repeating it again. A style applied to a parent element will also apply to all children elements present within the parent. What does that mean? Let me give an example. Example, if I say body text, I set it as blue. Just one example I'm saying. If I set the body text as blue, so everything inside the body. So let's say body contains headings, it contains paragraphs, it contains other text element. Obviously, images will not turn blue, right? Other text element like forms and all. Everything will turn blue. Okay, that is what you mean by cascading. So cascading style sheet, CSS in short. What does it do? It controls layout of multiple web pages all at once. Why it is called cascading? Because once you apply a style to a parent element, all the child elements will have the same property as well. That's why it is called cascading. What next? It describes how HTML elements are to be displayed. How do you want to display the HTML elements? That logic is determined by CSS. Then external style sheets are stored in .css or .scss files. The external style sheets you have, they are stored in .css or .scss files. Let's go to next one. Now let's answer the question, why we need CSS. Okay. First question comes, why do we need the CSS? In order to explain that, I want to show you some syntax of, I want to show something with HTML and then we will see how we can do it with CSS. So you probably would know, as of now, we're using HTML5, which was rolled out somewhere around 7-8 years ago. So HTML started with HTML1, then it moved to HTML2, then HTML3, then HTML4, then HTML5. This is the most recent one that we are using. Okay. In HTML 3.2, prior to HTML 3.2, we didn't have even this versions that we even did this basic details like form and color that we have. That was introduced in HTML 3.2. So we have this font, we got this font tag, we got this color tag, etc. in 3.2. Prior to that, there was nothing like this. Now, what happens is, problem or the biggest problem that developer has faced is, at version 3.2, we have the font tag, we have the color tag, but the problem is you have to use it everywhere. So you have to everywhere add this tag. What does that mean? Let's say, example, this is without CSS and with HTML 3.2. If I have to write a code where I want to print 5 lines in blue in color, repeating, I want to print 5 lines blue in color, I have to do like this. Color, let's say light blue. Give it in H2 maybe. And close the color tag. Okay. Copy this. This is how you will print 5 times. What do you see any problem here? Do you see any problem here? Correct. Okay, first is same code. What else? Correct. The biggest problem is there is no reuse. So any developer, if they have to do something, they have to write this color, light blue, etc., multiple times. Or how about I can define a common property if I can use, right? So this was without CSS. If I write the same code with CSS, just observe the difference. With CSS, if I have to write the same code, I am printing this H2 Devang 5 number of times. I'll just take this one. I'll just define one property that, hey, in my H2, just give the color as, that's it. Now you tell me which one is better, the first one or the second one. Come on guys, which one is better? Obviously the second one. That's why we use cascading style sheet, and this is not just for multiple to the very first definition I told, it can be used, where is it? It can be used to multiple web pages, right? It's not just for one web page, it can be used for multiple web pages. Okay. When we'll go for React and all, you will see I have multiple web pages in my application, but in multiple web pages, I just have one centralized CSS. That is the advantage of cascading style sheets. So we talked about why CSS. Why CSS part we discussed, much developer usage, easier to use, and obviously increase the effectiveness. So intro to CSS done. Why CSS done. Just for curiosity, as Angular has ng4, do we have anything in HTML? I don't hear any loop, but is there anything? Not necessarily. Not necessarily that we have in HTML. HTML is the very core basics, right? Angular is a framework altogether. So removing this, now coming it here. Now we are talking to talk about types of CSS and then variety of different CSS. That is important. So let's start here. Next topic, very important, is types of CSS. What do you mean by types of cascading style sheet? Type of cascading style sheet means what are the different ways to insert cascading style sheet. Just one thing to be very clear, what do we do is, in our HTML page, we insert CSS. Repeating it again, in our HTML page, we insert CSS so that we know how to display and where to display our HTML content. There are three different types. One is external CSS, one is internal CSS, and one is inline CSS. These are the three different types of CSS: external, internal, inline. What are these? Let's see one by one. External CSS. How does external CSS work? As the name says, external CSS. Where it is useful? It is useful where CSS is very large. Okay. You have so many elements in the CSS, you don't want to keep it inside the HTML. So you create a separate .css file, and that will be called as external CSS. So it changes the layout of entire website by using external style sheet. What is called external style sheet? It just include reference to that .css file in your external code. That is why it is called external. Repeating it again, the name says external CSS file means it will not be a part of your HTML. It will not be a part of your HTML. You just need to include the reference to .css file. It will be a different .css file. You just need to include the reference to .css file in your HTML code. That's it. How does it look like? Let's see. I create HTML. I create head. Whatever I want to create here, I'm not concerned. Just close the head. Close the HTML. All you have to do is you just need to relate with CSS. So link relation equal to style sheet. Just like this. And given the href, there's the one.css. So wherever that link is. That's it. And inside bevang.css, whatever you want to give, you can give. For example, I want to create table heading, table data with some border, some text margin, etc., etc. I can give like text align, make it center. I want to give body, background color as light blue or anything that I want to give. Okay, that's how it works like. So what do you mean by external files? External CSS means I have to create a separate .css file or SCSS file. It can be cascading style sheet or it can be short cascading SCSS. In that SCSS or CSS file, It will be used to change the layout of the entire website by using the external style sheet. All you have to do is inside your HTML code, you just have to add one line, link relation equal to style sheet. You have to give the link of that CSS file, wherever that file resides. So if it resides in slash CSS, let's say images slash this, just give the link of that. And in your CSS file, you just have to define this property. Okay, that is what you call as external CSS. One more thing to be clear, CSS files are case sensitive. Okay. CSS files are case sensitive and space sensitive also. Not just case, it's space sensitive also. So no extra space between value and the unit. What do you mean by value at unit? If I'm giving border as 10 pixel, this is correct. But if I have given border like 10 space pixel, this becomes incorrect. Okay. There has to be no extra space between value and the unit. This 10 is a value, pixel is a unit. So don't give any space between them. External CSS, everybody clear? Any doubt, please ask. Come on guys, external CSS, everybody clear? Any doubt, please ask. All good? Okay. If this is good, now let's talk about internal CSS. What do you have in internal CSS? Internal CSS is useful when all elements of same tag, follow same style. Okay. All elements of same type follow same style. Well, you can use ID also. You can give ID, you can differentiate by ID. That's also one good. So one single HTML page has unique style. What else? It is defined inside the style tag. Defined inside the style element. Okay, inside the head section. So it is defined inside the style element, inside the head section, and obviously all elements of same tag follows same style. Okay, let me just quickly show you a simple example. In my HTML page, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some style. So how do I add a style? Before in my body, you can give it before body or after body, whatever way you want to give. Let's say between the head, before closing the head, I want to give a style here. So what I'm doing is I'm defining style tag. Okay. In the style, all you have to do is just define the style types you want to define for. Let's say I want to say that my body should have a background color of what? Let's say light blue. Okay. My body should have a background color of light blue. I just zoom it out. I decided to zoom it out. Okay. Anyways, I go here. Now just observe something. I'm going to refresh it. Can you guys see? I'll close this tab. The background color has become what? The background color has become. I'll keep it like this. Now you guys can see, right? The background color has become blue. All of you can see it. All of you can see it. Okay. Let's do something else also. Wherever I want to keep h2, I just want it to be in the center. So text align, I'm just putting it as center. Refresh this, refreshing it here also. Everything in the h2 is now in the center. Can you see? So I can see heading 2 here, I can see list here, I can see table here, I can see text form here, I can see radio form here, checkbox form here, submit button. So anything that you want to change in the web page, you can just pin it like this. Remind you one thing again, the only drawback is that all elements of the same tag will follow the CSS property. For example, one h2 I want to change, one h2 I want to put in the center, other h2 I want to put in the left. How will I do that? That can only be given if you provide an ID. For example, this h2 with the heading, and let's say this h2 with a list. If we give an ID to this, then I can keep it on a specific ID. If I don't give it on a specific ID, then wherever it will find the h2, all of them it will be placed in the center. All clear with this? Let me know. Okay, if all clear with this, let's go back to our Sublime text. Here is what we are coding. So that one example, again, I want to reiterate here. I'll show you a simple code also. Let's say a simple, I can just copy it from here also. Copy this, paste it here. This we don't need, so I'm just going to delete this. HTML head, style. Okay. Now, one thing very important here is, I'll just close this style. What I do have is, let's say I have h2, Devang, and h2. Copy this. Similarly, I have h2, Sharma. If I use the internal CSS, what will be the output? I'll close the HTML also. I'll close that also. Okay. What will I have here? The output that I have here is both Devang and Sharma, they will come in the center. Okay. The use case was what? Use case was put Devang to the center and put Sharma to the left. I mean, don't change Sharma at all. Just put Devang to the center. How can I do it? With internal CSS, if I'm not providing a specific unique ID, then it will happen to everything. So ways that provide ID to h2. Provide different IDs to h2 with Devang and Sharma. These are the ways to solve it. Okay. Third and most important one, not most important, but last but not the least, is inline CSS. As the name says, inline, this is something which is embedded in a line. That's why it's called inline CSS. This is useful when you have customized to each element. You don't want to use an ID, you don't want to use ID, but you want to customize to each element. That is when you can go for inline CSS. So this apply for a unique style for single element. This applies for a unique style for a single element, and use style attribute again to the relevant element. Now, how do we do that? Same piece of code. Just copy this. This internal CSS is not required. Delete this. Take out these two. All I have to do here is just I will say, hey, give me a style. Style of what? Same. I want the text align. Where do I want? I want it in the center. Put a semicolon. That's it. Okay. Just copy this part. And that's it. Okay. Now what will happen? The output that you will see right now is Devang will be on the left. Okay, one moment. This in the center and this in the left. Devang will be in the center. This will be in the left part. Okay. That's how it looks in the inline CSS. So if you don't want to use ID, you want to customize it very specific to each element, that is when you can go for this one. All clear with this? All clear with this? Okay. Somebody asked a question. Let me cover that. If suppose I have one h2 high, h2 div class xyz, h2 good, h2 bad div. Now here if I add a CSS like dot xyz, what is dot xyz? Anyways, h2 color blue, then it will only applicable to h2 within the div, right? Yes, it will be only applicable. Correct. Correct. It will be only applicable with ID. That's correct. Okay. So quickly winding up on the CSS, then I have one question to discuss for interview, then we will go for selectors. Anyways, before going to selectors, let's quickly revise what you have done in the case of CSS. Here we start, introduction to CSS. CSS is what? CSS is cascading style sheet. It can control layout of multiple web pages all at once. Describe how HTML elements are to be displayed. External style sheets are stored in .css or .scss files. What is called cascading style sheet? First, a style applied to a parent element will also apply to all children elements within the parent. That's what is called cascading. Example is like body text or body align or text align. I've given it to whatever color I want. Now, body can include headings, paragraph, other text elements. Everything will turn blue. What are SAS and LESS? SCSS and LESS. These are two different types. I'll cover that. SCSS is the most one. SAS is not that much used as of now. .less files are also not used as much now, but SCSS and CSS is most prominently used. I'll cover that. These are also example of style sheet. These are not just cascading in nature. That's all. First question comes, why do we use CSS in first place? The reason we use CSS in first place, I've told you with the example. If we have to do some basic formatting just with HTML, till HTML 3.2, even these features were not there. At HTML 3.2, these features were introduced, font and color. So let's say the very simple functionality that I want to use some font and some color. I have to write a code like this, color light blue, color light blue, color light blue to each element. This is without CSS, right? This is just with pure HTML. Now you can understand the pain for a developer that they have to not only write multiple redundant code, but they have to rewrite it into a very different way or a very difficult way. With the introduction of CSS, what we have done is same piece of code, same output. If I need, I can say, hey, whatever H2 elements, make the colors light blue, so on and so forth. Then we talked about, so that's why that was the use case of CSS, and that's why CSS entered. That was the CSS was actually implemented. And then we talked about types of CSS or ways to insert CSS. CSS is always inserted in the HTML. What are the types of CSS or what are the different ways to insert CSS? Let's talk about that. There is external CSS, there is internal CSS, there is inline CSS, three different types. What are those? Let's discuss one by one. External CSS means these are the useful when CSS is very large. When you have to change the layout of the entire website by using the external style sheet, that is when you go for external one. You just include the reference to that .css file in your HTML code. So this is your HTML code. Just include one line, link relation equal to style sheet. Just give the hyperlink to the style sheet, devang.css. So inside your CSS file, whatever formatting you want to give, you can give it here. Okay. This is externally, this is a very file sheet. This is a large file sheet, which you don't want to include in an HTML page. That's why I kept it different. Pretty much all the big websites that you will see, they have a different style sheets. Nobody keeps it inside the same HTML page, right? Because if you keep it in the same HTML page, the bigger the HTML page, the more time it will render. Not sure how many of you have seen, if you have worked with React, the core root of element of React is app.js. Anybody worked in React? Or has seen the React project? Okay. Some of you have worked as well. That's good. The root project or the root idea of any React project is app.js. Any good React application, including Facebook, any good React application you will see inside app.js, they have minimum code. They will have routes, and each route will contain, each component will be responsible for different things, right? But inside my root element, that is the minimum changes. So when you load the first page or when you load the home page, it renders very quickly. We talked about SPA, WPA, single page application, responsive application. The whole idea is keep the minimum changes in the home page. Minimum changes mean minimum code in the home page to render it. Once it is rendered, once it is rendered properly, then each individual component is responsible for each individual part. That's it. Okay. Now, in terms of, that is the whole idea of keeping external CSS also. So that's what we talked about. One note that I've added here is CSS file are case sensitive. So don't type this border, this is incorrect. Okay. These are also space sensitive. Yeah, to maintain complexity also. And these are also space sensitive. What do you mean by space sensitive? No extra space between the value and the unit. So 10 and pixel, there should not be any space. This is incorrect. This will not be rendered properly. Then you have internal CSS. What does internal CSS means? It is useful when all elements of the same tag follow the same style. One single element HTML, one single HTML page has unique style defined inside the style element inside the head section. All elements of same tag follows the same style. Example I've just shown you, inside the style page, you can give body and h2. This is what we implemented in our page also. If I want to give text align as center, I want to give background color as light blue. You will see the output. It will be applied to both Devang and Sharma. If I want to give specific value, then I have to give ID equal to here. I will give the ID here with a div ID, and that div ID I can apply the style sheet here. Okay. So I have to provide different IDs to S2 with Devang and Sharma. That is the only way I can do with internal CSS. Apart from that, if I don't do that, anywhere it will find the H2, it is just going to keep it in the center because I applied this property. Okay. Then I move to third one, which is inline CSS. So what is inline CSS? Inline CSS is useful when it is customized to each element. So when you apply for a unique style for single element or use style attribute to the relevant element. So as you can see, this is my HTML page. One moment. Is there any best practice when it comes to type of CSS? Yes, the best practice is if your HTML page is small, or if the CSS amount of CSS file you need is small, go for inline one. That was actually my next question, so I will not discuss more, otherwise it will give the answer. The first thing is that if it is small, go for inline one. If you want to apply to a list of factors, go with the internal one. If it is very large, go with the external one. That is the standard best practices. Okay. Again, no hard and fast rule. These are the standard best practices. Then we talked about inline CSS. These are useful. So if you look carefully, I've given the use case every time I've written something. Useful when customized to each element. So if I have to give a simple HTML page, I want to give customization to center here, customize to left here. So Devang will be in center, Sharma will be on the left. As simple as that. Everybody clear with this? Everybody clear with this? Okay. If everybody clear, now I have a question. Take your time to answer it, not in a hurry. Just make sure you give the correct answer. My question is, can one web page, or one web page means one HTML file, contains more than one CSS? One CSS means one type of CSS. That's what I mean. Is it possible that one single HTML file can contain more than one type of CSS? Means internal also, external also, or inline also. Yes or no? Okay, we can have it together. Okay, the correct answer is yes. It can contain all three together also, or two together. If it contain all three, obviously it can contain two also. Now comes the bigger problem. If it can contain all three, if CSS, what should be the output? So follow-up question. If there are conflicting CSS, what should be the final output? What do you mean by that? I'm giving a simple code. Very simple code. Let me do one thing. Let me just create a new file. Let me just code it there. I'm just saying it as index2.html. Let's directly write down the code here. HTML is closed. Let's open the head also. Okay. Now what? I want to open the style. I want to close the style also. What I want to give is simple h2. I just want to give that text align, just make it center. Okay. Rest thing is not required. Now I give h2. I define my style as text align to be left and put a semicolon. And just I'm giving Sharma here. Close my h2. That's it. Tell me the output of this code. I just want to know the output of this code. Okay, one moment, guys. Just a simple thing. Some of you are new in the batch, some of whom I have taught before. The way we proceed for the question is, when I give you a question, you're expected to give answer directly to me so that everybody else can think of. If you give the message to everyone else, then that defeats the whole purpose of asking a question. Okay. So whenever I say I am asking a question, during that time, during 30 seconds, I'll give you 30 seconds, sufficient time to think everybody can think and they can give the answer. During that time, you have to message directly to me. Zoom provides the option where you can automatically message to me. Okay. 30 seconds on clock. I want all of you to think and tell me what will be the output of this code. Output in the sense, my inline CSS says, sorry, my internal CSS says print in the center, my inline CSS says print in the left. So where exactly Sharma will be printed? 30 seconds on clock. I want all of you to give me answer. If you need more time, do let me know, but I think 30 seconds is sufficient enough for this one. Your time. Cool, guys, enough time. Let's discuss the answer. What have you got? Center, left, center, left, center, left. Okay. Only two people have given me the incorrect answer. Rest all of you have given the correct answer. Let's run the index true.html. We'll see the output here itself. What do I get? Center or left? I got the output is left. So correct output is at the left. Closing this, coming back to my Sublime text, the correct answer is at the left. So this was the code example. Pasting it here. Output was, you will get Sharma in the left. Why will get Sharma in the left? Because whenever there are more than one CSS used, if there's only one CSS, there's no conflict. Whenever there's more than one CSS used and there's a conflict, there is a priority order, priority of CSS. What is that priority? Inline has the highest priority, internal, and then external. Obviously, you can see in the priority, this is from highest to least. So whenever you see like this, inline has the highest priority, then goes for internal, then goes for external. Okay. So the correct answer is Sharma will be printed at the left. Okay. Cool, guys. Everybody clear with this? Everybody clear with this? And this is important one, the priority of CSS. Okay. Now, yeah, now you can message to everyone. That's fine. Types of CSS done. Variety of different CSS done. Now we're going to start with CSS syntax and selectors. These are important. Let's talk about what is CSS syntax and selectors. First thing, CSS syntax in general. Syntax we have seen, it's pretty much the key value pairs which you give. What is a selector? Selector is, as the name says, selectors. You have to select something. So it is the HTML element you want to style. That is a selector. Okay. What do you mean by declaration? Declaration means one or more declarations separated by semicolon. One or more declarations separated by semicolons. Okay. Each declaration has the format name, comma, value. So any values that you give in a CSS syntax, it is actually in form of a declaration. So it can be one or more declaration given by a semicolon, and each declaration has the formula of name and value, so basically key and value. Selector is something HTML element you want to style for. So H2 in this code, color red and text align center. In this code, what is my selector? Selector is that HTML element which you want to style. I want to style this H2 tag. The selector will become H2 is a selector. Why? Because it points to HTML element you want to style. Number one. What is the declaration here? Declaration is, as you can see, the key value pair or name value pair, it is color red and text align center. This is declaration. Okay. Cool, guys. This part clear to all? This part clear to all? Okay. That was your CSS syntax. Now, after covering the syntax, I will go to next, which is CSS selectors. What are different selectors? How do we proceed for it? Let's talk about it. CSS selectors are used to select the HTML you want to style. Which HTML elements you want to style, that is something you define inside the CSS selectors. Okay. So let's see the different type of CSS selectors we have. Number one is CSS element selector. Okay. Which element I want to select? Let's see one by one. P, just give a color, give it red. Text align, just make it center. This one. This will apply style to what? This will apply style to all P elements, or basically P tags, paragraph tags. The next one. Once you have not defined any specific ID selector, it's just element selector. So wherever it will find this P element, or basically this paragraph tag, it will apply all of them, right? This will apply to all of them. That is called CSS element selector. Second is CSS ID selector. Now this is important. What do you mean by CSS ID selector? As the name says, it will only be selecting only the ID. So it uses the ID attribute of HTML element to select a specific element. What does that mean? I have a paragraph with ID equal to P1, for example. I say hi and slash P. Okay, just copy this here. I have world. There's no ID here. You want to keep ID, fine. You don't want to keep ID, that's also fine. Okay. Now, in this case, if I use a CSS like this, so one more thing, when you're using an ID selector, you use a hashtag. When you're using an ID selector, you use a hashtag. When you're using class selector, you use a dot. Repeating it again, whenever using ID, it's a hashtag. When you're using a class, it is a dot. Easier way to remember is CD. With class, C for class, remember CD, C comes before D. So with the class, I'll be using a dot. With the ID, I'll be using a hash. So hashtag P1, what I'm doing is color red and text align for center. What do you think will be the output? Quickly let me know in the chat. What do you think will be the output? Just quickly let me know in the chat. Come on, guys, be quick. Code is in front of you. What do you think will be the output? That is correct. You can message to everyone now. The time when I give it, that is when you have to just message to me. I'm just gonna go open index2.html again. Can you guys see high is in the center and it is in the red color? High is in the center and it is in the red color, right? That is what our expected output was always. I'll just go back here. Go back to main index.html. Back here. Okay. What you have done, you have given the PID equal to P1. You're trying to access it by only the ID selector. So only where the ID is P1, you will get the color as a text line as center. That's why only high was there in red and in the center. This is CSS ID selector and output high in red color. Third one is your CSS class selector. Okay. What do you mean by class selector? Class selector means it uses the class attribute of HTML element to select a specific element. It uses the class attribute of HTML element to select a specific element to apply the style, of course, right? So that example also we can take h1 class equal to name Devang h1. Then we have h1 Sharma again h1. Okay, we have p class equal to name. I'm just saying hi there. Just close the p tag. And I give CSS like dot name, give the color as red, give the text line as center. Like this. This is going to my CSS code. Okay. I'm copying this. This is my index 2. What do I want to put it? I just want to put this here, copy this here, remove this here. And what do we have? Just paste it here. Okay, cool guys. Let me know what will be the output of this code. This CSS code that I have written along with HTML, what do you think will be the output of this? Very straightforward. Just let me know the output. That's correct. Since a class attribute, okay, what is the difference between class attribute and ID attribute? What do you think? The answer to answer this, okay, one by one, I think this answer everybody has got. Even if not, we can see. What is happening is this is a class attribute. In the class attribute, color is red, text align is center, right? So this class you have given as name, this class you have given as name. So Devang will be in red and center, Hyder will be in red and center. Let's go to our index2.html. Let's try to refresh it. As you can see, Hyder is in red in center, Devang is in red in center. So that is what we expected. Everybody has given the right answer so far. So you will get you will get Hyder in center and in red color, which is correct. Okay. But the very fundamental difference I have asked, what is the difference between ID and class here? And that difference is sufficient enough to answer by whatever you are seeing on the screen. Difference between ID and class selector. Two people has already given the answer, by the way. That's good. That's really good. Anybody else? Again, I'm showing it. Whatever you have to answer, whatever is the correct answer, you can see it on the screen. It is very well visible on the screen. What is the difference between ID and class attribute? I'm giving 10 seconds for everyone. Two of you have given already correct answer. Be quick. Think about it. Let me know. Then we'll discuss. Cool, guys. I think enough time. Let's discuss the solution. By this time, I believe everybody should have noticed. ID is equal to just P1 here, but class is name here also, class is name here also. So what is the difference? The difference is class can be used to multiple elements. ID is specific to one element. ID is unique. Okay. ID is specific to one element and classes can be used with multiple elements. It can be same type, it can be different type. So same class name I can use with multiple P or H tags or whatever different elements that I can use now. Okay. One more important thing is that multiple classes can be used. Multiple classes can be used in selectors, CSS selectors. What does that mean? As of now, I've just used one class here, right? Class happens with a dot and ID happens with a hash. I can use multiple classes, but I cannot use multiple IDs as CSS selectors. What does it mean? It means like this. I can create a P class equal to center large. Okay. Now this center and large, these are actually two different classes. And I can see save dot. I can be define in CSS that I want to keep center in the center, large in the large one, right? So I can define my selector, class one, keep it at center, class two is my large. This is correct. But I cannot say P ID equal to 1 and 2 and same here. This is not correct. Where 1 and 2 are corresponding to different IDs, this is not correct. That's how it looks like in terms of multiple classes. Okay. All clear with this? All clear with this? We talked about three different types of CSS selectors so far. CSS selectors are used to select the HTML elements you want to style. We talked about CSS element selector. We talked about ID selector. We talked about class selector. ID selector represented by hash, class selector represented by dot. Any doubts so far? Let me know. If not, then we can move to fourth type. So in first class can be accessed only by any name. First case class can be accessed by any name. No, not by any name. You have to define the class name, right? So this class that you have kept it here, you can define that. So in the style sheet, you can say I can class one, I want center, class to this. Name can be anything, yeah. Class name can be anything. Anything is not a, if it is not a keyword, it can be anything, right? So you cannot say class equal to center. Let's name it to something else. Center is fine. You can use with the name center also. Okay, but avoid using keywords in general. That's what I meant. Last is your CSS universal selector. What do you mean by universal selector? Universal means format everything, right? Or apply the style sheet to everything. That's what universal means. If you guys have used CSS, you would definitely, if you guys have used SQL, you will definitely know when you do select star from table, what happens? There is no where condition, it's just select star from table. Come on guys, be quick. If there is no where conditions, let's start review. Selects everything, all rows basically, everything is not very technical. It will select all rows. That's the right terminology to use there. Okay. Yeah, all rows means consisting of all columns. Okay. Now, what will happen here is this universal selector, something similar to that. Universal selector is defined by star. So if there's a property that you want to apply to everything in the web page, everything, heading, p tag, body, whatever, everything you want to apply, that is where you go. For example, in my web page, I want all the content to be shown in the middle. I'll put text align to the center. That's what it means. Okay. Output, it will apply styling to all the HTML elements in page, not specific to one or two, to all the HTML elements in the page. This part clear to all? This part clear to all? Easy, much easy CSS selector, right? There's one more type CSS selector, which is CSS grouping selector. What do you mean by CSS grouping selector? Let's see that also. Grouping, as the name says, if you have more than one selector which has the same property, why do you want to write it again and again? Why don't you group them together? That is what is called CSS grouping selector. Repeating it again, if you have more than one selector which has the exact same style property, rather than defining them again and again or differently, you can define them in the one group. So grouping selector selects all HTML elements with same style properties. Okay. Grouping selector selects all HTML elements with same style properties. What does that mean? Let's say I have a table as a selector and I define my border to be 10 pixels. I define my table heading with a border of 10 pixels. I define my table data with a border of 10 pixels. Now observe something, all of them have the exact same style property, right? If I have to group them together, that will be much easier rather than defining 3 different times. I can simply say border 10 pixel, apply this property to what? Apply this to table, apply this to table head, apply this to table head. That's how it works. All clear with this? Let me know. Any doubt, please ask. Easy, much easy. Cool. These were your CSS selectors. Before moving to the next topic, I will just revise this one. After the CSS selectors, we will have CSS colors. Syntax done, selectors done, moving it to the to-do, next one to the colors. Okay. Before I move here, let's quickly revise what we have done. So I think this part we have already revised. Inline CSS, internal CSS, we have defined. The one we have revised was this one, right? CSS syntax. So CSS syntax, what is the CSS syntax? There's something called selector, there's something called declarations. Selector is that HTML element that you want to style via CSS. That is called a selector. What is a declaration? One or more declaration which is separated by colon. Declaration is actually the CSS syntax, and each declaration has a format of property and value. Instead of name and value, just name it as property and value. Which property, what value you want to give. Example, you can see in this CSS code, this H2 is a selector where it pointing to the HTML element you want to style. So this will become a selector. This color red and this text align center, these are the declaration as you can think, right? Then we talked about CSS selectors in detail. CSS selectors are used to select the HTML elements you want to style. There are 5 different CSS selectors. We'll go one by one. First one was element selector. So whenever you have to select an element, you can just define that element. For example, p tag, h tag, body tag, whatever it is. For specific to one element, it will be applying all the properties. Apply style to all p elements in HTML. Second is CSS ID selector. If you want to make your CSS specific to ID, it uses the ID attribute of the HTML element to select a specific element. For example, I have 2 p tags here. First one with the ID p1, second not any ID, or even if it is with some other ID. What happens here is, whenever using the ID element or ID selector, you have to use a hashtag. ID goes with hashtag, class will goes with dot. So it will just apply this property to this p1. It will print high, it will print red color, right? In center, high in center, and red color. Next one is CSS class selector. It uses the class attributes of HTML element to select a specific element in HTML. So h1 class equal to name, and next h1 does not have a class. When you say dot name, it will apply those properties to this class equal to name. So color becomes red, text line becomes center. So you will see Devang is red and hi there is red. They're also given p class with name. So it's not specific whether it is h or p or any other tag. Wherever the class name is found, with different headings, with different paragraphs, with different bodies, with different div, wherever the class name is found, it will apply everywhere. Okay. That was the difference between ID and class attribute. ID is specific to one element. If you use it in a paragraph, you will not use the same ID in either in paragraph or in headings or somewhere else. Class can be used to multiple elements between the same elements and across the same elements. What does that mean? You can use it same PID, you can use it with different classes, or one class can be used with 2 different Ps, or same class name can be used with Ps, H, and whatever different tags you can think of. Multiple classes can be used in CSS selector, but multiple IDs cannot be used. This will not work. Okay. Then we talked about CSS universal selector. What do you mean by universal selector? 4 type of selector. Whenever, just like in SQL, you give select star, so that is. So the star is universal selector. So whenever you want to apply the star, this property will be applied to complete HTML web page. Apply styling to all HTML elements in a page. Then you have CSS grouping selector. What is that supposed to mean? Let's make it here. CSS grouping selector, as the name says, you are going to group the selectors. Grouping selectors. Grouping selector selects all HTML elements with the same style properties. So as you can see, table, th, and td. In this table, th, and td, all of them have the same property of border 10 pixel. So if you have to group them together, you can group table, table heading, table data, border 10 pixel. Okay. This is something that we have done so far. Everybody clear? Give me clear. Any doubts? Please ask. Okay. If one element is having conflict with the ID and class, then which style will be applied? If one element is having conflict with ID and class, that's a good question. In that case, ID will have the privilege. Preference will be given to the ID. Okay. Cool, guys. All good. Then let's go to next topic, which is CSS colors. Yes, it is COLOR. It is not COLOUR. It's American English, not the British one. What is CSS colors? In CSS colors, we have different type. We have background color and we have the color of text. So let's talk about one by one. Background color. What do you mean by background color? Background color means the color which is shown behind the text. This is not the text color. This is the background color. Color which is showing behind the text or image. That is the background color. Okay. Example. In Sublime Text, as of now, that you're seeing on the screen, my background color is what? My background color is black. All agree? My text color is white, my background color is black. All clear with, but I'm talking in terms of background color. Okay. Now in terms of code, how does the code look like? Code looks like whatever, same on H1. I'm giving this, whatever CSS you want to give, you can. Background color and whatever color you want to give to. Just put a semicolon. So what will happen if I execute this code? My complete background will become red. As simple as that. Copy this. Just put somewhere here. Save it. Execute it. You will see the output by yourself. Can you see? My entire background becomes red. That's what I was saying. Bring it back. Here we are. That is my background color. Okay. Second, what do we have? We have text color. Text color means, as I have just shown you, this is a real time and this is color of text. That's it. How does the code looks like of that? The text color code looks. This is text color also and this color of border also. But I'll come to the color of border a bit later. Color of border. Let's cover that also. Well, technically it's called border color. Border color means color of border. I'll write the code, all of them together, so it's much easier to see. Here we are. H1 style background color I've given red, that is fine. H1 style, if you just give color red, now this will be shown in the red style. So copy this. This is the code. Okay. Now, actually, I have to delete this one. Why I have to delete this? I'll tell you. Anyways, now run this code. As you can see, the color becomes red. Now the text color becomes red, not the background color becomes red. This part clear to all? My text color becomes red, not the background color. Okay. Now I'm gonna do something. And just look at this piece of code, line number 33 and line number 35. I'm going to run this. Okay. It worked technically. Just one more thing to add. This is working fine. Now I'm just adding one more thing. Okay. What do you think will be the output of this line? Line number 36. What do you think will be the output of line number 36? Come on, guys. This line I'm talking about. The first one, what have you got? You got the Devang in the black color, of course, and then you have the red background. Next one, you have this Devang. So now I'm going to run this. Why Devang is not here? Tell me. Yeah, I got the answer. Why Devang is not printed here? Tell me that first. Line number 36, I'm printing Devang, but I'm not seeing this Devang on the screen. For simplicity, let's make it like Devang 1, Devang 2, and Devang 3. Much simpler, right? Why there is no Devang 3? Technically, Devang 3 is there. Can you see now? If I highlight it, now you would be able to see. Why you're not able to see it earlier? Because what you have done is you have given the background color as red and you have given the color red also. That's why. I'm not sure how many of you have used this coupon sketching card or something. Have you guys used this coupon sketching card? So something is not visible and then you do something, something becomes visible. Those kind of pictures I'm talking about. A good example of that can be in applications like PhonePe and Google Pay, you get coupons or scratch coupons or something you get, right? So click on them or if you just scratch on them, they become visible. Earlier, they were not visible. All agree? I'm sure you guys would have used PhonePe or GPay or whatever applications. Those kind of features, they are done by these CSS properties. So everything becomes, let's say, a particular color, and then you start scratching, you will see elements being observed right there, right? That's how it becomes. Anyways, that was just an example that I kept here. So copy this, pasting here. And here also I'm updating. It is not visible. Okay. Last thing was border color. How do you add a border color? Let me show you that also. To add a border color, it's very simple. Define h1, give a style. In that h1, I just want to print the 4 here. Close the h1. In style, you have to give a border. Just define the border property. Let's have given 2 pixels and solid and color whatever you want to give. I'll keep the violet one. Now I come back here, refresh it. You can see there is a border. The border is just 2 pixels and the color is violet one. There's a violet border across it. That's how you can give the border color. Okay. So taking this one also and pasting it. Okay. Remove this, remove this. This was a piece of code. Cool guys, this is what we have covered in the class till today. Now let me revise the complete thing and all together, and then we can wrap up the session. We still have the CSS background colors that will be continued. We'll get classes on Flexbox, Flex and Pollution. Yeah, you will get on Flexbox, Flex and Pollution. There will be classes on that. Still something more to discuss in this. Then I'll go for next one. Transparency, horizontal repeat, background image and all. That is something we have to do. So there are things in CSS family. I mean, CSS family also have to go, fonts have to go. So CSS still yet to complete. Absolute positions and all, that will take time. Anyways, moving on to next, let's quickly revise what you have done in today's class. After revision, we started with HTML forms. HTML form is used to collect user input. User input is most oftenly sent to a server for processing or putting in a DB. Form element we talked about used to create HTML form for user input. Number one, we talked about form elements. In terms of form element, it can be a input, checkbox, radio element, submit button, etc. So we got the input element, we got label element, we got the code for text input, radio button, checkbox, submit, etc., etc. Then after completing our HTML, we finally move to CSS. Introduction to CSS. First, CSS cascading style sheet can control layout of multiple web pages all at once. It describes how HTML elements are to be displayed, and external style sheets are stored in .css or .scss files. What is called cascading? Because a style property applied to a parent element will also apply to original elements. Example, body text I give to blue, so that will happen everything inside the body. Headings, paragraph, and the text elements, everything will turn blue. Why we go for CSS? So as the HTML is proceeded, we understood the problem that even if I go with the basic HTML that provides me font and color, it will become very difficult for me to have a good looking website, right? So with CSS, it becomes very easy for a developer to make a good looking website or a good UI in the website. Then we talked about what are different types of CSS or ways to insert CSS. We talked about external, when the useful when CSS is very large, we just have to embed it. Then we talked about CSS files are case sensitive and space sensitive. We talked about internal CSS, useful when all elements of same type follow the same style, like this. And then we talked about inline CSS, where useful when customized to each element. So this is inline CSS. In terms of their priority order, can use more than one CSS. Output is you can contain all three also. In terms of order of priority, it is inline, then internal, and then external. Okay. CSS syntax we talked about, selector and declaration. Selectors are the HTML elements you want to style. Declaration is one or more declaration separated by the key value pairs and separated by semicolon. So as you can see in this code, a selector is h2 because h2 elements is something I want to style. Declaration is color is red and text line is center. In CSS selectors, we talked about different kind of selectors. Selector can be element selector, it can be an ID selector, it can be a class selector, it can be, we talked about difference between ID and class attribute. It can be a universal selector or it can be a grouping selector altogether. Then we talked about CSS colors, we talked about background color, we talked about text color, and we talked about border color. And here's the code for all of them. Okay. Do not do this, do not make the background color and color of that particular text as the same, otherwise it will not be visible. This is something that we have done in today's class. Any doubt in today's class, let me know. If it is all clear, please type clear in the chat.